In a far corner of the galaxy, where the laws of physics barely hold and the unknown stretches out like an endless canvas, there lies a story of a human who has become the unlikeliest of legend. A story that defies all expectations, a narrative that no one could have imagined unfolding in this universe. Imagine a single human, not a mighty warrior or a conqueror, but an ordinary person caught in the extraordinary, surrounded by the most powerful beings in the galaxy, the apex predators, the fiercest warriors, and the most intelligent of alien civilizations. And yet, this human holds something no one could have anticipated: an alien harem, all of them carrying his children. The thought alone is enough to send ripples through the very core of the Galactic Council, sending some to question their beliefs, others to seize opportunities, and a few to wonder if the human race is truly as insignificant as once believed. What's more fascinating than the human's survival in a galaxy filled with such powerful beings? It's the unexpected bond he shares with these women from various species, a connection born of something deeper than mere attraction. This is not a tale of power, nor of dominance, but of the unlikeliest of unions that have shaken the very foundation of intergalactic relationships. As the human tries to navigate this uncharted territory, a series of questions arise. How did he earn the trust of these alien beings? What is the nature of their bond? And why are they all pregnant with his children? For some, it's a mystery that holds the key to a future none of them could have predicted. For others, it's a potential weapon, a power that could alter the balance of the entire galaxy. One by one, the alien women from distant worlds have been drawn to this human. Some came seeking knowledge, others came to conquer, but all found something they didn't expect: love, companionship, and a connection that transcends their species. Now, as the consequences of their union begin to unfold, the stakes grow higher. Each alien woman, with her own culture, her own power, her own role in her society, faces the question of what this shared experience means. Their pregnancies have set the stage for something much bigger, something that could either unite the galaxy or send it spiraling into chaos. The human himself struggles to understand his role in all of this. How did he become the central figure in a web of alien relationships so complex? Was it fate or mere coincidence? As each day passes, he finds himself torn between his newfound responsibilities and the pull of a world much bigger than anything he ever imagined. The delicate balance between the alien cultures and his own humanity weighs heavily on his mind. And though the alien women respect him, but not all is calm in this new world. As the human faces his growing role in the galaxy, a shadowy figure lurks in the background, someone who would use the situation to their own advantage, someone who sees the growing human-alien connection as a threat to their power. This threat, still hidden in the shadows, poses a danger to everything the human has come to hold dear. As the alien women grow closer to their due dates, the danger becomes ever more real. The tension escalates with each passing moment. Allies and enemies begin to blur, and the lines between right and wrong become increasingly difficult to define. Can the human maintain peace between the different alien factions while protecting his loved ones from the lurking dangers? Or will the growing threats tear apart everything he's worked so hard to build? His choices will determine the future, not just for him, but for the galaxy at large. With each day, the stakes grow higher and the tension reaches a boiling point. The looming uncertainty surrounding the alien cultures, his relationships with these powerful beings, and the forces conspiring against him make for a gripping tale, full of suspense and mystery. How will the human navigate this chaotic world? Will he rise to the occasion, or will the weight of his responsibilities crush him? As the countdown to the births draws closer, so does the inevitable confrontation. And with it, the truth will be revealed. The human may have found love in the most unexpected place, but it's not just a love story. It's a fight for survival, for unity, and for the future of all beings across the galaxy. Who will emerge victorious? Who will betray the others? And what will the universe look like when the dust settles? As the tension builds, the countdown to the next chapter in this extraordinary tale begins. What happens next? Only time will tell, and the journey is far from over. The days were growing more tense, and the human found himself standing on the precipice of an uncertain future. The alien women who had once arrived from distant worlds, each with their own complex histories and motivations, now shared a bond that seemed unbreakable. The quiet moments between them, when the galaxy's chaos seemed far away, were the ones he cherished the most. But even those moments, filled with warmth and companionship, could not hide the growing storm on the horizon. His mind often drifted back to how it all began, how these powerful beings, each considered extraordinary in their own right, had ended up in his life. It had all started with the unexpected encounter in the galactic marketplace, where his unassuming demeanor had caught the attention of a being from another world. She, like many before her, had come to study humanity, to understand their place in the grand scheme of things. But what she found instead was something that made her question everything she had believed about her species. What had begun as a professional interest had quickly blossomed into something deeper. As the days passed, more women from different alien factions arrived, intrigued by the mysterious human who seemed to defy all expectations. Each one came for different reasons, one to study him, another to test her strength against his, and yet another to see if he truly was as ordinary as he appeared. But with each encounter, something shifted. Something unexpected formed between them. The human had tried to make sense of it all. He had never asked for this, never sought to become the center of a galaxy-spanning web of relationships. Yet here he was, caught between the affection of powerful, alien women and the overwhelming responsibility of being the father of their children. The stakes were higher than he could have imagined. His once quiet life on Earth seemed like a distant memory. Now, his every decision could shape the future of intergalactic relations. While the women in his life seemed content to stand by him, each had their own reasons for joining him in this unlikely arrangement. The first, from a race known for their intellect and fierce independence, had been the most reluctant. She had come to study humanity, but the more she observed the human, the more she realized there was something different about him, something that no amount of logic or science could explain. Over time, her initial curiosity had blossomed into something she had never expected: affection, and eventually love. But even she was uncertain about what it meant for her people and what their union might bring. The second woman, a warrior from a planet known for their fierce battle tactics, had arrived with an agenda of her own. She had long been intrigued by Earth's role in the galaxy, but when she encountered the human, something shifted. There was a strength in him, something that had nothing to do with power or battle tactics. It was a quiet, unassuming resilience that seemed to draw her in. She, too, found herself torn between her loyalty to her people and the growing feelings she had for this human who had somehow brought them all together. The third, a healer from a world where compassion and empathy were valued above all else, had arrived with a deep sense of duty. She was a figure of calm amidst the chaos, her every word spoken with kindness and care. Her relationship with the human had begun as one of mutual respect, but over time, it had deepened into something much more profound. The bond they shared was one of trust and understanding, and with each passing day, she found herself more committed to the future they were creating together. As for the human, he often found himself questioning how he had ended up in this strange situation. He had always been an ordinary person, no special talents, no extraordinary abilities. Yet here he was, surrounded by beings far beyond his own understanding. Despite the overwhelming odds, he had grown to care deeply for these women. But there were also moments of doubt. What did the future hold for them? What would happen when their children were born, when their connection to the galaxy grew even stronger? Would he be able to protect them all? The answers, however, remained elusive. Despite his growing bond with the women in his life, there were forces at play that he couldn't begin to comprehend. The galactic politics surrounding his existence were becoming more complex by the day. Some factions saw his connection with these alien women as a potential weapon, something they could use to their advantage. Others feared what it could mean for the balance of power in the galaxy. Whispers in the shadows spoke of a conspiracy to undermine the humans' influence, to take control of the situation before it spiraled out of control. Even as the women in his life stood by him, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something big, something that could alter the course of their lives. The growing unrest in the galaxy had made it clear that not everyone saw their union as a peaceful arrangement. There were those who believed that the mixing of species, particularly in such intimate ways, was a dangerous precedent. Would the galaxy be able to accept this new reality, or would it tear itself apart trying to destroy it? And yet, despite the mounting tensions, there were moments of peace. The way the alien women, each from a vastly different background, had come together for one common cause was something truly remarkable. It defied the very nature of their existence. The warrior woman, the healer, and the intellectual had found harmony in their differences, their growing affection for the human bridging the gap between their cultures and beliefs. But their unity was fragile, and there were many who would stop at nothing to shatter it. The human found himself walking a delicate line, trying to protect his loved ones while grappling with the consequences of their union. The reality was that he was just as much a part of the galaxy's grand scheme as any of them. The choices he made would ripple through the stars, shaping the future of countless worlds. As the days passed, the human began to realize that his role in this cosmic trauma was far greater than he had ever anticipated. But the greatest mystery of all still lingered. What would the birth of his children mean? What would their presence in the galaxy bring? And how would the galaxy react when it learned that a human, one of the most insignificant beings in the vast expanse of space, had fathered children with some of the most powerful women in the universe? As the tension continued to build, the human realized that the true test was just beginning. What would the future hold for him, for his children, and for the galaxy at large? And with each passing day, the answers seemed just out of reach, like stars twinkling in the distance, their light ever so faint yet undeniably present. The tension in the air was palpable. Each passing day seemed to stretch into eternity as the stakes continued to rise. The human found himself constantly on edge, unable to shake the sense that everything he had built, everything he had come to cherish, was teetering on the edge of a precipice. The women in his life, Each, with their unique strengths and backgrounds, stood by him, but their unity was beginning to feel more fragile with each new development. The political climate in the galaxy had shifted dramatically in recent weeks. Alliances that had once seemed unbreakable were beginning to fracture, and factions that had remained neutral were now picking sides. It was no secret that the union between the human and these alien women had attracted the attention of those in power. Some saw it as an opportunity to gain an upper hand, to wield the humans' newfound influence as a weapon. Others, more fearful of the unknown, viewed it as a threat that needed to be eradicated before it could grow too powerful. The human was no longer just a curiosity, no longer just a simple man caught in the whirlwind of intergalactic affairs. He was a symbol, a beacon for something larger than himself, something that could change the course of the galaxy forever. But with that status came danger that he was only beginning to comprehend. The women, too, were feeling the pressure. The intellectual from the distant planet had grown increasingly withdrawn, her once calm demeanor now clouded by doubt. She had always been the logical one, the one who believed in the power of reason and intellect. But the deeper they delved into this connection, what did this union truly mean for her people, for the galaxy? Could it really be as simple as love, or was there something more dangerous at play? The warrior, ever the protector, had become more vigilant. Her sharp eyes never seemed to leave the horizon, and the air around her had taken on a certain intensity. She had always known the stakes, but now, with the growing unrest, she could sense that a storm was coming. She had no illusions about what was at risk. If the galaxy was truly going to descend into chaos, she would do whatever it took to protect the human, to protect their future. But, in her heart, she knew that protecting him might mean something more than she was prepared for. The healer, too, had begun to change. Her once gentle presence had become steely, as though the weight of the universe itself was pressing down on her shoulders. She had always been the one to offer solace, the one who brought peace to their chaotic world. But now, her soothing words were tinged with a sense of urgency, as though she knew that time was running out. The birth of their children, once a joyous occasion. What would the birth of these children, these unique beings, mean for the future of the galaxy? How would the galaxy react when it learned that a human had fathered children with some of the most powerful beings in existence? Would they be viewed as a threat? Would they be used as pawns in a game they couldn't even begin to understand? The human could feel the tension tightening around them all. Every conversation felt more significant, every action more deliberate. The eyes of the galaxy were upon them, and he couldn't help but wonder what would happen when the time came for them to step out of the shadows and face the world they had inadvertently created. The question weighed heavily on his mind. Would they be able to survive the scrutiny? Or would the galaxy destroy them before they could truly understand the power they held? And then there was the constant underlying fear of betrayal. In the back of his mind, the human couldn't ignore the nagging thought that one of the women he had come to trust and rely on, might turn against him. He had seen the lengths to which some would go for power, for control. The thought that one of them might be playing a game of their own, using their bond for their own ends, kept him up at night. He could no longer rely on the simplicity of their love. The stakes had grown too high, and there were too many forces at play. The quiet moments, once filled with laughter and comfort, now felt like fleeting glimpses of normalcy in a world that was growing more chaotic by the day. The human longed for the days when he could simply enjoy their company without the weight of the galaxy pressing down on them all. But those days were gone. The universe was shifting, and they were caught in the middle of it. As the birth of their children drew closer, so did the looming threat. Whispers of rebellion, of factions rising up to challenge the status quo, filled the air. No one knew for sure what would happen when the children were born, but there was a growing sense that this moment would mark the beginning of something much bigger than any of them could have anticipated. And so, with each passing day, the human and the women who stood by him braced themselves for what was to come. They could feel the storm gathering on the horizon, the weight of the unknown pressing in on them. But in the midst of the chaos, one thing remained certain: their bond was undeniable. Their love, their connection, had become something more than just a fleeting moment in time. It had become something eternal, something that could not be broken by the forces that sought to tear them apart. As the final moments before the birth approached, the human couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. What would the future hold for them? What would happen when they stepped into the light, when the galaxy finally learned the truth about their union? The answer, he feared, might be far more complicated than he was prepared for. But one thing was clear: their story was far from over. It had only just begun. As the days stretched on, the tension in the air grew thick. The impending birth of the children loomed like a storm on the horizon, and the human could feel it deep in his bones. The constant whispers in the background, the subtle changes in the atmosphere, it was as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for something monumental to unfold. And then it happened. The first sign came during an ordinary meeting with the leader of one of the galactic factions. The conversation was supposed to be a simple diplomatic exchange, a way to maintain the delicate balance of peace that had existed between them and the other faction. But as the human spoke, something changed in the room. The air grew colder. The leader's gaze hardened, and there was a tension in the way they spoke, something veiled beneath the words, something that hinted at a greater scheme unfolding behind the scenes. The human could sense it, the subtle shift in energy. The conversations were no longer just political. They were personal, dangerous. This wasn't just about maintaining peace. It was about control. And someone in that room had just signaled their intent to use him, to use everything he had built for their own gain. The women, too, began to feel it. The warrior, who had once been unwavering in her loyalty, started to act more cautiously. Her sharp eyes darted around them as though she could sense the growing threat, but even she couldn't pinpoint what was happening. The healer's once steady hands trembled slightly as she worked, her mind racing with the realization that something was wrong. The intellectual had grown distant, lost in thought, as if piecing together fragments of a puzzle she didn't want to solve. Then, the second twist hit. The human received an unexpected transmission, a private message from an anonymous source, one that claimed to know the true purpose behind his connection with these women, the real reason the galaxy had been watching them. The message spoke of an ancient prophecy, one that had been buried for centuries, and was only now coming to light. According to the message, the union between the human and these alien women wasn't a mere coincidence. It was the fulfillment of a prophecy that foretold the rise of a new power, a force that would reshape the very fabric of the galaxy. The human's heart raced as he processed the words. The prophecy spoke of a child, not just any child, but a being who would possess the power to bring about either peace or destruction. And this child, it seemed, was to be the first of many part of a lineage that would forever alter the balance of power in the galaxy. The message warned that forces from both within and outside their alliance were already plotting to control this power, to use it to dominate the galaxy. But the true shock came when the message revealed that one of the women, the one who had always been the most loyal, The one who had stood by him from the very beginning might not be who she claimed to be. There were hints of a secret history, one that had been concealed for years, and it was now coming to the surface. Was she a double agent, working for those who wanted to control the prophecy? Or had she been manipulated by forces she herself couldn't fully understand? The human's mind whirled as he processed the implications. Could the one person he trusted the most be hiding such a massive secret? How had he missed the signs? And if the prophecy was true, what did that mean for the future of his children? Could they truly be the key to the galaxy's survival, or would they be the instrument of its destruction? The emotional weight of it all was unbearable. The love he had for these women, for their unborn children, had been the anchor that had held him steady in the storm. But now, that love was clouded by suspicion, by doubt. How could he trust anyone when even the prophecy itself seemed to be working against them? Was this all just a manipulation? A plan set in motion long before he had ever met any of them? The stakes had never been higher, and yet the human couldn't shake the feeling that they were all hurtling toward a confrontation, one that none of them were truly prepared for. There were too many unknowns, too many players, and too many forces at work in the shadows. Each decision he made could either strengthen their position or destroy everything they had fought for. The days continued to pass, each one feeling heavier than the last. The human could feel the pressure building, not just from the outside world, but from within their very group. The walls were closing in, and the choices that lay ahead seemed almost too much to bear. Would the prophecy play out as foretold? Would the women, each with their own secrets, remain united in the face of the truth that was now coming to light? Or would the cracks in their bond finally tear them apart? As the time drew near for the birth, the human couldn't help but feel that they were standing on the edge of a precipice, with the unknown stretching out before them. The conflict had only just begun, and the real test was yet to come. The galaxy would soon know the truth about what was happening, about the human who had somehow managed to unite a group of alien women and father children that could change the future forever. But what would the galaxy's response be? Would they embrace this new power, or would they see it as a threat to their way of life? There were no easy answers, no clear path forward, only uncertainty, danger, and the ever-present sense that the worst was yet to come. The tension that had been building for weeks finally erupted on the day the first child was born. The human stood by the side of the alien women, watching as the labor began in earnest. Each woman was experiencing the process differently, and yet the similarities were unmistakable. The room, once a quiet sanctuary, now buzzed with the urgency of life beginning to take form. But amid the joy of new life, a dark realization gnawed at him. The prophecy was coming to life, and the stakes of their choices had never been higher. Outside the room, the other galactic factions were already moving. They knew what was happening. The balance of power was shifting, and they were not about to let it slip away without a fight. The transmission he had received, warning of the dark forces conspiring to control the prophecy, seemed to have been only the tip of the iceberg. Now, these factions were no longer just watching. They were taking action. The human's heart raced. Everything he had fought for, the unity, the love, the hope for a better future, was at risk. But the most disturbing part, the very prophecy that had once seemed like a distant possibility now felt like a trap. The women, the children, his love, they were all pieces in a much larger game. But who was playing the game and who had set the rules? As the first child was born, a scream echoed through the chamber. The healer, who had been helping with the delivery, suddenly collapsed to the floor. Her eyes were wide with fear as she muttered something incoherent. The human rushed to her side, but it was clear something was terribly wrong. The healer was never one to panic, never one to show fear, yet here she was, visibly shaken, her breathing erratic. What had she seen? She looked up at him, her eyes filled with both sorrow and regret. It's all true," she whispered. "The prophecy, it's not just about the children, it's about you. They knew you would come. They knew you would bring us together. They knew we would trust you, and they used that trust against us." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. But the healer could not respond. She had fallen unconscious, her breath shallow. The tension in the room was palpable, thick with the weight of something monumental about to unfold. And then it came, the final twist that none of them could have expected. As the first child's cries echoed through the chamber, a voice filled the room. One that was not human, not alien, but something else entirely. A being that none of them had ever encountered before. The voice spoke calmly, but with an authority that sent a chill down the human spine. "You are all pawns in a game you cannot understand," the voice said. "The prophecy was never about saving the galaxy. It was about reshaping it in my image." The human's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just a galactic plot. This was something deeper, more ancient, something beyond their comprehension. The voice continued, revealing its true identity, an entity that had been manipulating events from the shadows, pulling the strings of the galactic factions for centuries. It was not a god, not a leader, but something much more insidious, a being that existed outside the boundaries of time and space, with the power to rewrite the rules of existence itself. The human felt his stomach drop. This was the truth, the one he had been desperately trying to avoid. All the events leading up to this moment, all the trials and tribulations had been orchestrated by this unseen force. And the prophecy? It had never been about a savior. It had been about creating a new order, a new reality where this being would reign supreme. The women, too, were shaken by the revelation. The intellectual, always the sharpest of the group, had pieced it together faster than the others. She had been silent for too long, her face pale as she absorbed the weight of the truth. "This is why they're watching us," she said, her voice trembling. "They wanted to control us, to control the children. But it's not just about power. It's about rewriting the very fabric of existence." The human's mind raced. What could they do now? How could they fight an enemy so powerful, so far beyond their understanding? But even in the face of this overwhelming revelation, something inside him refused to give up. These women, these children, they had come into his life for a reason. They had given him a purpose. And no matter how impossible the odds seemed, he would fight to protect them. He turned to the women, his resolve hardening. "We have to fight. We have to stop this." But the voice continued, its tone mocking. "You cannot fight what you cannot see, what you cannot understand. You are merely vessels for a greater plan, and you will all serve your purpose, whether you like it or not." The room was filled with an unbearable silence as the human realized the enormity of the situation. There was no easy way out. The forces at play were too vast, too powerful. And yet, in that moment, something shifted. The first child, who had been quiet up until now, suddenly began to glow with an unnatural light. The glow intensified, becoming brighter and more blinding with each passing second. The human's heart pounded in his chest as he realized the truth. The prophecy had always been about the children, not just as a weapon or a tool, but as a catalyst for something even greater. This child, this newborn, was not just part of a galactic scheme. It was the key to unlocking something beyond their wildest imagination. The power to reshape the galaxy, to tear down the old systems, to destroy the entity pulling the strings from the shadows. And as the light from the child reached its peak, the voice faltered. There was a hesitation, a crack in its once impenetrable facade. The human knew what he had to do. He took a step forward, his heart filled with determination, ready to face whatever came next. The universe was changing, and with it, the fate of everything he had come to love. The final battle was about to begin, and this time, the stakes were higher than they had ever been. The tension in the room was palpable as Alec's hand hovered over the controls. Every instinct screamed at him to prepare for the worst. The shadowy figures closing in on their location meant only one thing: the hunters had found them again. Behind him, the alien women stood ready, their faces a mix of determination and fear. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and still recovering from their previous escape. But Alec couldn't let fear take over. They had made it this far together, and he wasn't about to let it end here. The ship shuddered as the proximity alarm blared, jolting Alec into action. His fingers flew across the console, activating the ship's limited defenses. "Hold tight," he called back, his voice steady despite the chaos brewing inside him. The women didn't flinch. Even now, they trusted him, and that trust gave him strength. The first blast hit like a thunderclap, shaking the ship to its core. Sparks flew from the walls, and Alec gritted his teeth as he struggled to stabilize their course. One of the women, the one with violet-tinted skin and sharp, calculating eyes, rushed to his side. Her name had always been difficult for him to pronounce, but he'd grown used to the melodic way she said it. "We can't outrun them," she said, her voice steady, "but we can outthink them." Alec glanced at her, understanding what she meant. The ship's firepower was almost non-existent, but they had one thing the hunters didn't: each other. Over the past weeks, they had learned to function as a team, their bond growing stronger with every shared moment of danger and survival. If they could combine their skills, they might just have a chance. "Okay," Alex said, his voice firm. "Let's give them something they don't expect." The next few minutes were a blur of coordinated chaos. One of the women rerouted power to the ship's damaged engines, coaxing them to life with an ingenuity Alec could hardly fathom. Another calibrated the ship's scanners, mapping out a nearby asteroid field that could serve as temporary cover. Meanwhile, Alec focused on the hunters' formation, calculating their movements and searching for any weakness. As the ship dove into the asteroid field, Alec's plan began to take shape. Using the field's dense clusters of rocks, they could create a series of traps to slow the hunters down. It was risky. One wrong move, and their ship could be torn apart, but it was better than sitting still and waiting for capture. The plan worked better than Alec could have hoped. As the hunters pursued them into the field, the alien women worked in perfect synchronization, triggering explosions and creating diversions that forced their pursuers to scatter. For the first time in what felt like forever, they had the upper hand. But just as they began to feel a glimmer of hope, the largest of the enemy ships emerged from the shadows, its weapons locked on their position. Alec's heart sank. This wasn't just a hunter, it was a warship, and it was ready to finish the job. He turned to the women, his mind racing. "We've got one shot at this," he said. "We take out their command ship, and the rest will fall back." But I need all of you with me." They didn't hesitate. Each of them stepped forward, their expressions resolute. Together, they devised a final, desperate plan. Alec would pilot the ship straight toward the warship, drawing its fire and creating an opening for the others to deliver a critical blow. It was dangerous, almost suicidal, but it was their only chance. As the ship hurtled toward the warship, Alec felt a strange sense of calm. This was it, the moment everything had been building toward. The alien women worked furiously around him, their combined efforts pushing the ship to its limits. Just as the warship prepared to fire, Alec activated the emergency thrusters, veering sharply to the left and exposing the enemy's vulnerable underbelly. "Now!" he shouted. The alien women unleashed a coordinated strike, their weapons piercing the warship's shields and striking its core. For a moment, there was silence, a stillness so profound that Alec could feel the weight of the universe pressing down on him. And then, the warship exploded in a blinding burst of light, its debris scattering like stars across the void. The remaining hunter ships retreated, their formation broken and their will to fight shattered. Alec slumped back in his seat, his body trembling with exhaustion. They had done it. Against all odds, they had survived. The days that followed were a blur of repairs and recovery. The ship was battered but still functional, thanks to the alien women's ingenuity. As they worked together to piece it back together, Alec felt a profound sense of gratitude. These women, so different from him, yet so connected, had become his family. One evening, as the ship drifted through the quiet expanse of space, Alec gathered the women in the common room. They sat in a circle, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the ship's lights. "I don't know what the future holds," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "But I know this. We've been through too much to give up now. Whatever comes next, we face it together." The women nodded, their expressions a mix of determination and warmth. They didn't need words to convey what they felt: trust, loyalty, and a bond that transcended species and circumstance. In the weeks that followed, they continued their journey, seeking out allies and forging a new path for themselves. The women began to reveal more about their pasts, sharing stories of their homes and their dreams for the future. Alec listened, his admiration for them growing with every word. As for the strange bond they shared, it remained a mystery, one they might never fully understand. But Alec didn't need answers to know what it meant. These women had given him purpose, and he had given them hope. Together, they were something more than survivors. They were a family, bound not by blood, but by choice. And as they sailed through the endless expanse of stars, Alec couldn't help but smile. The universe was vast and unpredictable, but for the first time, he felt ready to face whatever it had in store. Their story wasn't over. It was just beginning. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough.